Well, this sort of dovetails this question that I got from a listener. I asked my listeners, what would you ask Tim Ferriss? And I have a really good question from a listener named Brian. Thanks, Brian, for sending me in your question. He wants to know, Tim, what business would you create right now, given your 15 years of experience? He said he read The 4-Hour Workweek in its first printing, but he was never able to get traction with anything that he chose. He's in a stable work situation, so he's making money, and he has enough free time and capital to start an online business. What would you say to him?
I would say, and I get questions like this
I'm
a
sure,
lot,
yeah.
as you can imagine. If you were starting over and only had $500, how would you make $10,000 in the next month? I get a lot of, and I'm not saying that to disregard his question. I will answer it, but it's my recommendation would be to number one, the 4-Hour Workweek Muse sections are helpful. You could certainly go to my blog and look at Muse examples. I think that's, some people are inductive and other people are deductive. And I feel like many people will come up with better ideas if they just review a bunch of examples, as opposed to me saying, here are the principles, go create your own examples. So if you go to 4hourblog.com and just look at the Muse example category, all of it's free. I think that could be very helpful. A few other resources, and then I'll tell you why I'm giving these resources is not one pat answer. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, I think, is very helpful for thinking about positioning. And then lastly, I think that oftentimes people who don't find a business idea that gets traction don't get traction because they don't really test. They don't have a handful of ideas to test. They have one idea, and that is a very slow and resource intensive way to go about doing things. If you're going to test one idea, it only takes perhaps 10% more energy to test 3 or 4 ideas. And there's a competition going on, at least at that time of this conversation, through Shopify. So if people go to shopify.com/Tim, they can see it. But it's an opportunity to get resources. They've free articles, even if you don't join it, for choosing your product or service, right? So how to choose your product. And they walk through some of the methods that are very up to date on how people do research and analysis to choose a product. But it is fundamentally a very, very personal decision. I can't say Bitcoin's really hot right now, you should do A, B, and C. Or everything's moving to virtual reality, you should do D, E, and F. That would be irresponsible of me, because coming back to one of the lessons that I mentioned, you have to choose your market first and then your product. And the way you choose your market is by identifying what demographics, what psychographics you understand intimately. And very oftentimes, at least for me, that's a demographic that I belong to. And when I wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, I knew I was writing for 2 very specific friends of mine. That's how I wrote the book. And they were both in the, let's just say, 20 to 35-year-old tech-savvy male demographic. And it doesn't mean that the book is only for those people. The target, and I can't recall who said this, but the initial target is not the market. All right. And my audience is now almost a 50-50 split. But in the beginning, you have to know who you are selling to. And if everyone is your customer, then no one is your customer, and you will waste all of your money. So the short answer is you need to decide who you are targeting. Who are your 1,000 dream customers? What do they read? What do they eat? What do they watch? What does their day look like? What kind of jobs do they have? What kind of cars do they drive, if any? Et cetera, et cetera. And then, and only then, will you be able to say, go onto Facebook and thin slice it and try to run test advertisements for $100 or $200 instead of saying, this widget will sell itself. Let me blow all of my savings on one remnant ad in USA Today. That is a bad way to go about things. So that's perhaps a longer answer than expected, but it's a very, very personal decision. And you have to play to your strengths, and you need to decide on your market, your 100 or 1,000 ideal customers first.
And this person has the luxury of having a job right now. So you have income coming in. You probably have your nights free or your weekends free. Optimal time to be really researching this. And thanks for that responsible answer, Tim. That was I like that answer.
Yeah, my pleasure. And it's not just a responsible answer. It is a risk mitigating answer. Mm-hmm. And I think that people have a vision in their heads oftentimes of entrepreneurship as this Wild West throw caution to the wind, jump off the cliff and learn to fly on the way down type of activity. And I don't view it that way at all. I'm very, very conservative, and I'm all about minimizing risk and downside. Richard Branson would say the same thing. I always recommend when people say have a job, like you said, that is when you test for a potential business of your own. You don't quit your job and then hope to figure it out. That is a very dangerous way to go about playing the game.